right, guys, this is another mini episode of the bird name game, and I'm going to talk about two of these birds. One of, well, let's say both of which kind of make it look like they walked right out of the dinosaur era. One of my favorites, and I know you've already all heard me talk about it before, but sorry, I'm doing it. You know what? No, I'm not sorry. I'm going to talk about this bird because it is one of my favorites, and I do think it's one of the cooler birds. It's tall, it's powerful, and has a bright blue neck and head, dagger-like claws, and a strange helmet on its head, the cassowary. And it's often described as one of the most dangerous birds in the world. Here's the funny thing. The other bird that I'm going to be talking about is the emu. And for a long time, people couldn't quite decide what to call a cassowary, and so they just kept swapping the names back and forth. So let's put all that aside for right now, and let's jump right into the cassowary. So cassowaries live in the tropical forests of New Guinea and northern Australia, and there are 3 subspecies in total. They're large flightless birds. Thank God they don't fly. Related to emus and ostriches, and they can stand around 5 to 6 feet tall, which is terrifyingly awesome. But what makes them stand out is the casque, right? It's that helmet structure on top of their heads. Scientists still debate exactly what it's for. There are actually scientists that talk about, do dinosaurs have these things for the same purpose? It might help them just simply push through dense forests, amplify their deep booming calls, which if you haven't heard a cassowary call, look it up on YouTube or something. It's crazy. But it also may just signal dominance to other cassowaries. Whatever the purpose, it definitely makes them look like they're wearing prehistoric armor. The name cassowary actually entered European languages in the early 1600s, likely through Dutch traders. But the word itself comes from Southeast Asia, which would make sense, specifically from the Malay word Cassowary, K-A-S-U-A-R-I. And that name may go back even further to Papuan languages, combining 2 words that roughly translate into a horned head, which makes sense when you look at the casque sitting on top of the bird's skull. So the cassowary's name is basically describing the most obvious feature people have noticed, the bird with the horned head. But things got confusing, of course, when Europeans started encountering the giant birds. So let's then talk about emus and how they got confused. So emus are also another large flightless bird, and these ones live all across Australia. They can reach nearly 6 feet tall, run incredibly fast, and have powerful legs built for covering huge distances across open landscapes. If cassowaries look like armed forest warriors, I guess, emus look more like a shaggy runner of the Australian outback. But the name emu has a surprisingly complicated history. At first, the word wasn't even used for emus at all. Early Portuguese explorers used the term ema as a kind of general name for large flightless birds like the rays, the cassowary, ostriches. Some linguists think that the word ultimately traced back to the Arabic name for the ostrich. So originally, ema was basically shorthand for big, weird, flightless bird. When Europeans eventually reached Australia in the late 1700s and encountered the bird that we now call the emu, they weren't entirely sure what they were even looking at. Some early observers thought that it might be a type of ostrich. Others thought that it was related to the cassowary. In fact, one early name for the emu was New Holland cassowary. And eventually the shorter name of it, rather than calling them, look at the New Holland cassowary, the name emu just stuck. But for a while there, these giant birds were all tangled up in the same naming confusion, just going back and forth. If you saw a tall bird, it was an ema. And so that's just kind of what it was. So yeah, that wraps up today's episode. Cassowary's name likely comes from Southeast Asian languages, basically describing its horned head, while the emu inherited a name that originally referred to all kinds of giant flightless birds long before Europeans even realized Australia had its own unique species. Which is a good reminder that when explorers first encountered these animals, they were often guessing. Sometimes they guessed right, and sometimes they just said, looks like that other kind of big bird that we saw over there, and the name stuck. All right, guys, cassowaries and emus. That wraps up today's episode. Next week, Laura is going to do one more episode, and then we're going to kick off season 14. So make sure you guys are following on all social media. Go support us on Patreon if you can. That really helps us to keep this going. So make sure you go follow us on social media, and until next week,